Hello, everyone, and welcome back to yet another episode of the Eljay Johnsen Show. This show airs every single weekend, every Saturday at 4 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time, unless specified otherwise over on Twitter at the Eljay Johnsen, where you can find updates and guest announcements every single Tuesday. And if you have any questions over the week, make sure you head on over to ELJAYJOHNSEN at gmail.com. Remember, that's JOHNSEN, not ON. Perfect. All right, we're back into the swing of things. We're back into the rhythm. Everything is good again. All right, so one of the many different types of conversations that happen in the LEGO community is that of licensed themes. Now, there are two kinds of themes that usually the LEGO group create. There are original IPs, which would be stuff along the lines of Hero Factory, Bionicle, Legends of Chima, Nexo and most notably Ninjago. And then there are licensed properties, those that LEGO adapt from other companies and or groups, such as Batman, the Marvel films, Harry Potter, and so on. Many an individual have an opinion on this specific topic in the LEGO community, and I am quite excited to get to discuss this today. Here to discuss why there are far too many licensed themes in LEGO, and why that might not be good for the company, is BB202. How are you doing today?
Great, LJ. How are you? Happy to be here.
Doing well, doing well. Yeah. Usually I ask people how the weather is, so how is your weather?
It's currently snowing here. Just getting a good bit of snow right now. I think it's going to keep going throughout the day.
Oh, okay. All right, fair enough. Do you like the snow? Like, is this a good thing?
I do like the snow. I think that, it's just nice to have that. Sometimes it's too hot around here. Gets into the 60s during the winter. And, when that happens, it just doesn't really feel like winter. It feels more like spring, and it gets kind of muggy.
Yeah, no, I know exactly what you mean. Right now, it's a little bit on the warmer side, which is awfully unusual for January. I'm expecting it to be really, really cold, and it's really, really not. So, but all right, well, in that case, let's go ahead and start off with a few of the basics, what I usually ask individuals here. And that starts off with, how did you get into LEGO? How did you get into the community and get into to what you do now?
Oh, I've been a Lego fan for a very long time. I probably got my first set, say maybe 2005, rough estimate. And funny thing was, I was initially very into Star Wars, and that was my favorite theme for a long time, because I was a fan of the Clone Wars show when that came out, so I got a bunch of the sets that, corresponded with that. And then over time, I kind of transitioned into non-licensed themes. My main theme since 2010 has been Castle. I was around for the Kingdoms theme, Castle 2013. I bought a lot of the Nexo Knights too, and I've really been a Castle fan with a lot of City as well, and as well as like the modular buildings and stuff for a pretty long time. Where we are today.
Okay, and what made you make that transition from something such as Star Wars into the more original properties LEGO offers?
I think it's because as I got all this Star Wars stuff, it just got kind of boring to me. Pretty much everybody who's kind of young has a Star Wars phase, something like that. And Star Wars was the licensed theme that I was into. I was never into any other licensed themes except for Star Wars. But over time, I realized they just kept making of the exact same clone trooper, just variants of the same stuff. And it's because the source material cycling the same stuff over and over again. But at that point, I was kind of getting into more mature subjects, away from animated cartoons and stuff, and into like medieval history. I really like medieval history outside of LEGO. So obviously I was curious. I looked back and I saw that LEGO had a huge backlog of stuff. So I decided I was just going to, dip a toe in the water with the current theme that was out at the time, which was Kingdoms. And I think my first set was the Prison Carriage Rescue. And I got that and I was just like, wow, this is a great theme. And I was hooked. So I got most of that line. And then I just had less, the presents I was asking for Christmas and my birthday just didn't really include Star Wars anymore because I would rather devote my time to getting stuff for the Kingdoms.
Interesting. Okay, so essentially, you kind of moved out of it because you felt that Star Wars just really wasn't in your sphere of interest, and you were finding more enjoyment out of the originality, the creativity of the original properties that Lego creates, and kind of leaning more into what Lego is generally about, which is just doing all these new and inventive things.
I would say that's true. I think that there's something to be said for Lego designing and being wholly responsible for themes such as Kingdoms, as opposed to with Star Wars, essentially, Disney didn't own them at that point. But Lucasfilm was telling them there are certain rules they have, like they can't make, for example, a collectible minifigure series of Star Wars because it's not in the contract. But they theoretically could do that for Kingdoms, and that's how you see like historical figures show up in the unlicensed collectible minifigure series. And it's just about like not only the company's freedom to make, it's also about the builder and the kids and the adults that are buying these products. They get more variety. Like every time when there's a new castle theme, they refresh every few years. There's a variation in the factions and techniques used this time around. And people could argue that they're rehashing stuff, but when you look at it, it's really not rehashed because it's not the same thing. Like Star Wars, they can make a replica. They can make let's say, a Star Destroyer, and a few years later, they make another Star Destroyer. Well, they don't look exactly the same, but they're based off of the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's just kind of. I appreciate the imagination and the creativity that went into the process. As you know, their slogan is like "play well,"
Mm-hmm.
so there's something to be said for creativity.
Okay. I think that does a really good job of setting the stage for the conversation going forward, because you are also of the opinion that, or primarily, I should clarify, of the opinion that Lego has too many licensed themes, and this is a detriment to them overall. Can you elaborate on that point as well?
Okay, there are a lot of angles to approach this. And one of them, as I said, was the creativity aspect. And then there's also there's a monetary aspect to that as well. Lego pays a fee to these companies for their products to license sets that they can then redistribute under their own brand. So they have to pay that fee, which means they need to sell more than average of their license themes, the products, more than they have to make a profit on a non-licensed theme because that's developed in-house. They're not paying for anything else outside of that. So they have to sell more. And what you're going to get are a lot more sets coming out. They're not really inspired sets. There wasn't a lot of, like attention to detail or something that went into these sets. They're just kind of thrown out there. If they're making a set for a new Batman movie, they'll give you Batman. They'll give you the main villain or something. They'll put in this kind of build that may or may not be in the movie. And, it's not really well thought out. But what they're doing is they just want you to buy it for the figures. And the licensed fans will be, wow, check out the new printing on this figure or that. And they don't actually care about the build because they care more about the figures.
Mm-hmm.
I care about. I would, I think they're kind of devoting almost too much into the printing on figures now. More plain figures head off for having better design of sets. So regardless, they're not doing that. And past few years, they've actually lost money. And they had negative growth last year in their sales overall. This year, I believe there was either no growth or still growth or more negative growth. And you have to wonder if that corresponds to the increased amount of licensed themes that seem to have gone up exponentially in recent years. And they were doing really well probably about 10 years ago, where 3/4 of their themes were non-licensed. So you have to wonder about that.
Interesting. Okay, so let's go ahead and really deep dive into that right now. So I've never actually looked at the ratio of licensed to non-licensed themes. So I've got up here right now, it's Lego Shop at Home, and you just click on their themes tab, and it has a drop down of all their, I don't want to say active themes, because they have a few that they have discontinued still here, but I'm going to take this at face value and say, all right, this is at least the last few years of Lego. And so we'll very briefly go over this. So they have Architecture, which is original. They have Boost, which is original. I'm gonna leave Brickheads alone. They have City. They have Classic, Creator 3-in-1, Creator Expert. Dimensions I'm gonna leave alone since it's a little bit of a crossover. Duplo.
You're cutting out a bit.
I apologize. Connectivity issues. Elves, Friends. Let me see. Ideas is kind of a mixed bag, but it's more so original than not. But I'll leave it alone. Juniors, Mindstorms, Minifigures, Nexonites, Ninjago, Serious Play. Speed Champions is a licensed theme technically. Technic, Unikitty, and Extra. So that is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18 at the least original themes Lego has right now. As far as their non-licensed, as far as their licensed themes, I'm going to leave Brickheads alone again. DC Superheroes, Disney, Fantastic Beasts, which is kind of lumped into Harry Potter, but we'll count them as 2 for now. Jurassic Park, Jurassic World, Minecraft, Overwatch very recently, Powerpuff Girls, Speed Champions, Star Wars, Lego movies, and the Lego Batman movie will technically count as licensed. Lego Movie 2, I'm going to leave that alone along with the Lego Ninjago movie. Well, the Lego Ninjago movie would count as a original theme. So we've got 19 original themes in conjunction with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, roughly 11 licensed themes. Now, there is a little bit of overlap with some of them. Obviously enough, the overlap, of course, would lie in Brickheads, Dimensions, Rest in Tiny Pieces, Ideas, and that would just be it. That'd be about 3 themes. Now, in your opinion, just hearing 19 original themes, 11 licensed, and 3 overlap, do you believe that to be too many licensed properties?
Yeah, I do. I looked at this kind of in a different fashion, I think, in that a lot of pretty much all the licensed themes you mentioned have a lot going on with them. They have a lot of push, they take up a lot of Lego's advertising, they take up a lot of their marketing campaigns, stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Now, these non-licensed themes here are hardly even themes. You got to look at like Boost. You're just getting like one set. It's just a robot, and there's really not too much of a difference between stuff like Boost and Mindstorms, which I also believe is on here. And you're not going to count Brickheads. When I look at Brickheads, I see probably about 4/5 of those are licensed, I would say, and they've put out dozens and dozens and dozens of those. Those are all over the place, and those do not sell. But that's a different point. Elves is discontinued. So it's 2 of their big original themes that are not going to be sticking around. While more licensed themes just keep continually getting introduced, you have to wonder if Lego has replacements for both Elves and Nexonites, and my belief is that they do not. As you can see, the lists are coming out later and later every year. But so far for next year, we have no new coming out. While for licensed themes, we've got a whole big push for Infinity War. We've got the big introduction of Overwatch. We've got a lot more stuff going on with them, really.
Mm-hmm.
I think that it is vastly disproportionate, the ratio between licensed and non-licensed in terms of number of sets produced and marketing push.
Mm-hmm. All right. Now, I will make one brief correction on my part. I failed to mention Ghostbusters, which is still kind of floating around, so no pun intended. So that would be 12 licensed themes. And now, again, the clarification I made was that this is not a face value look at LEGO right now. It is more of a over the last few years, because LEGO Shop at Home clearly hasn't updated. Because you're right, Elves and Nexo-Knights are gone. They are not continuing. This year we will not see them. So I'll go to Brickset's current list, and they have a new for 2019 list. So as far as their original themes, we have, according to this, we have City, collectible minifigures, which we'll count because that's more so original. Creator, Friends, Ninjago, Technic, and that is about where we'll leave that. As far as the licensed properties are concerned, we have Disney, Marvel Superheroes, Minecraft, Overwatch, Speed Champions, Star Wars, and I'm leaving the LEGO Movie 2 open because that's a crossover. So make that a crossover, Polybags a crossover, and leave it there. So that leaves us going into 2019 with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 original themes, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 licensed themes, and 2 crossovers. So that is a even split down the middle between licensed and original. And in your opinion, you find that to be weighed too heavily in favor of licensed?
I do. I think if you look at that ratio of 6, 6, 2, which is a total of 14. So if we're working on 14 themes, portion that as I would leave the 2 crossover because I don't really know what to do with that.
Exactly.
But I would have 3 licensed themes and 9 original themes. And what I would bring back is I would take out, but those 3 additional non-licensed themes would be I would have a castle theme again. I would bring back either pirates or space, and then I would have 1 wild card theme that I would put out that's kind of like a completely new idea, something like Atlantis, that I would put out and just see what happens there.
Okay. All right. Now, when I look at this, obviously, the split is certainly far more than has been in the past. If you're not familiar with me at all, which, trust me, I wouldn't blame you. I'm not very well known in the grander LEGO community. But I come from a Bionicle background. My heavy investment in LEGO has been Bionicle. It has been Exoforce, and Ninjago to a much lesser extent. So I am obviously quite invested in original IPs. Where my perspective comes in here is I still find the quality of sets to be really good, regardless of licensed or unlicensed. I think that the price per part ratio and the price of licensed sets is pretty abhorrent. There is obviously that General Grievous set from a few years ago that was like 100 and something odd pieces, and it was like 30, 40 bucks. It was absolutely ludicrous. It's terrible. The set was fine, but the price was egregious. I find that when I look at the individual licenses and themes, like I've dabbled very heavily in the Ninjago movie sets, and I find them to be some of the best LEGO has made, period. Ninjago City, I have not had a building experience like that ever. It's so outstanding. But then I also find myself going, well, Minecraft is also excellent. It is one of my favorite active LEGO lines, I'll say, because I find the sets to be just absolutely stellar. They are so good. They do an unbelievably excellent job at capturing an environment. They capture a 3D space. And to that, I find that to be wonderful. I think that's really good for a LEGO set. And they're modular, so you can make them however you want. And I find that to be great. I think you're right that Star Wars has been a bit oversaturated. And I also agree that in some instances, licensed themes are a tad restrictive. Because I even found myself recently working on the Lego Overwatch Reinhardt and Diva set and going, I can make corrections here, but I'm building it how the instructions suggest because I want to see what the designers intended this to be. I wanted to treat it more like a model instead of a Lego model. So I can kind of see where you're coming from, but how do you feel about the quality of licensed sets as opposed to non-licensed sets?
Well, there's a very big swing, I would say, much larger than non-licensed themes in terms of non-licensed themes have a high floor and a high ceiling in terms of set design. Because completely mail it in, worst case scenario is you get something that you can do a lot with even still. Like they'll give you maybe kind of a subpar castle or kind of a subpar pirate ship, but it's still a very good base to start something off with. And you can improve it from there if you truly feel so. And it has the potential to be something like the Kingdom's Joust, which is one of my favorite sets that I own. That's very detailed. It's catered specifically towards people. You know, there are a lot of callbacks to older things going on in there. It's very put into it. And the swing with licensed themes is there's a very low floor, but a very high ceiling. Because you could go from them either making a set that is so cool, you know, they put so much effort into, like a Death Star from Star Wars or something that's just overflowing with detail. And it's clearly something that is like, you know, a jewel of that year's lineup. Or you could go something down to like the sets that have come out in Marvel superheroes recently, or DC superheroes, that are just so impossibly mailed in, right? And they're just bad. And then the entire goal of that set is just to sell you the minifigures.
Mm-hmm.
And people will pay a premium to buy the minifigures, right? And they kind of discard the build.
Mm-hmm. I can kind of see where you're coming from there, especially with DC and to a slightly different extent Star Wars, because I know that I have joined many of the people that I associate with in complaining about DC just being the Batman theme, and they kind of shoehorn in other DC characters like Green Lantern. Oh look, he's here too. Wonder Woman, there she is. But it's really just a Batman collage. How many different Batman comic costumes can we put into this theme for this release? So you're not. I definitely wouldn't say you're incorrect in that standpoint. It definitely seems weighted for some of the licensed themes. But what about themes such as Minecraft that don't seem to have this affliction?
Well, what I would say is that that you really like Minecraft, and I can see where you're coming from on that, but Minecraft has its appeal to certain people based on the fact that it is designed after a game. So it's kind of built the same way the game is designed, and I think there's something to be said for that. But the problem to me is that I just cannot get over how 8-bit it looks. It's kind of just blocky and kind of like something you would build out of you know, like a classic brick box or something. And I just don't understand why that on the surface at least, you know, I don't own any Minecraft sets, but just taking a casual look, it looks like something you would build out of a classic box. So why people are willing to pay a premium for something, as I said, looks kind of simple to me.
Interesting. Okay, because I have plenty of Minecraft sets, and I've only ever ended up regretting one purchase, and that was a set I built and was like, I don't know why I built this. This is really poorly done. But that's in comparison to another 12 that I have, roughly. Very rough estimate. But I think when it comes to Minecraft specifically, of course, and we'll move back into a more general, less specific point in a moment here. I feel like Minecraft doesn't really have a substantial cost issue. Obviously, in some instances it does, as it is, you're right, it is a licensed theme, and they are generally higher in price. But I find them often being worth that price. I find the builds to be generally engaging, and they offer a classic LEGO experience from a property, I think, obviously, massively popular property. 91 million players a month at some point last year. So I think it does a good job from an adaptation level, but it also does a good job from a play theme, a play set level. You can really do a lot with it. There's a lot of creativity you can pour into it. And the blockiness, I feel that the blockiness lends itself really, really well to a LEGO theme. So I think that Minecraft is the best of both worlds, where you have so much play value, you have so much visual distinction. The sets are their own 3D environment. And I feel that that is really, really excellent. It's what I'd want to see from more LEGO sets that aren't just a couple of vehicles in a box or a couple of disconnected buildings or structures that you kind of just have to use your imagination to put in an environment. And I think that that's a really great positive for at least LEGO Minecraft. I think it does a really good job in that instance. I mean, I highly recommend getting one of them. You know, I can make recommendations for days. It's a very engaging experience. Some of them can be a little repetitive, but I think that you would really appreciate, you know, seeing them in person. So I definitely recommend it. LEGO didn't pay me to say that, nor did Minecraft. No. but I digress. So, moving on. When it comes to... How would you resolve this issue? Let's say we're not going to change how many licensed and non-licensed themes there are. We're just going to keep it at the half split, 6-6. How would you improve upon what is here?
Saying like what the contents of the sets?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So kind of a conundrum that these designers have is that movie comes out, you know, they have to get a wave of sets out, such as like the highly anticipated The Force Awakens sets for Star Wars. They came out a few months before the movie did, and I remember that the designers were not given a lot to go off of. A lot of movies that they're given a general outline of what to make or like a few key vehicles, but they don't know when they're going to show up in the film, where, stuff like that. So that often leads to them kind of taking a shot in the dark, and that might not be in the film, you know, kind of little lazy side builds to drive the piece count up because they're given a certain price point by the guys at the top, and they're supposed to build a set that fits in with that. So you'll see some stuff that just gets kind of mailed in. Example of that would be Kylo Ren's shuttle. I own it. It's not the best set ever, and the problem was it's missing two key features, one being the fact that it's jet black in the movie and the set is completely gray, and also the fact that the wings are supposed to fold out in the movie, and in the set form they do not move at all. Now, $120 for a toy. I want something that functions as it appears in the movie. So, if anything, I think generally where you get the worst designs, the pre-movie wave of each license. The way I would improve that is by asking for maybe a better communication channel between the owners of these licenses and LEGO, where they give them more to go off of, more key designs, stuff like that, so that LEGO stuff that would spoil the movie, definitely not actually, but stuff that, you know, details that LEGO a very, you know, a set that is very faithful to the movie, so that people aren't disappointed when it comes out and the set they just spent a lot of money for does not fit in with the movie at all.
Okay. And so you would angle more toward accuracy and proper representation of the source material in licensed themes.
Is that?
You would angle more toward accuracy to the source material when it comes to licensed themes.
I think that's very important, especially because we're paying a premium.
Okay, fair enough. I can kind of relate to that. I can definitely see where you're coming from because obviously, you are paying the price, so you need to be getting what you're paying for. So I can certainly I don't know if sympathize is the right word. It's not empathize. I think that's more accurate. So now when this conversation arises, oftentimes Star Wars is the cited theme, which is understandable. It's, I would argue, the largest of the licensed properties. Especially, it's the longest running. They're celebrating 20 years this year. Now, would you say that this is an issue all licensed themes suffer from, or is it mostly a DC and Star Wars issue?
Okay, well, looking back at the list of themes, I would say that the main culprits are DC, Star Wars, and Marvel, but uh, Jurassic World can also fit in there. Fantastic Beasts can fit in there. Anything that has a movie coming out has that problem.
Mm-hmm.
Themes that don't relate to a movie, maybe video game licenses such as Overwatch and Minecraft. Again, those don't have that problem, but they are in the minority.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so you definitely your grievances lie more with the film themes due to their heavy restriction. BB, are you there? You there? Hello? Technical difficulties, ladies and gentlemen. We're gonna go ahead and switch server settings right now, so let's see if this does any good. Alright, BB is still there? Still with us?
Yep, I can hear you.
Excellent, excellent. Okay. So, you would definitely say that a lot of the grievance lies with the film properties because of their heavy restrictions.
Yes.
Okay. I can sort of see where you're coming from. Now, would you say that the licensed themes are more of an issue for LEGO because they're not creatively done, because they are so inherently tied to their properties, or would you say they are an issue? Like, what would be the main issue for having so many? If they're generating revenue, they're generating profit, they're still working for the LEGO group, and they're offering fans of those properties kind of a Legoized version of the properties. What would you say is the primary fault of LEGO for relying so heavily on them?
Yeah, so them making sets that cater towards fans of those licenses is fine. I don't have an issue with the fans, certainly. I think that lies with the fact that the more time they devote to licensed themes, the less time they devote to their original IPs. And when they do that, they alienate a lot of people who have been fans of the product for even longer than their license period has been around.
Mm-hmm.
The first license was in 1999 with Star Wars,
Mm-hmm.
and that's only 20 years old. And you've got people who have been fans of Lego for 30 or even 40 years, and they're kind of like, what's the deal, Lego? You're going to make 50 Star Wars sets a year, but you can't give us 3 or 4 castle or space sets, and you go 5 years between pirate themes. They're wondering, along with me, if that's really necessary for something, for these long breaks to happen between their non-licensed themes, just so they can pump out so many of these licensed sets. And it's like, there's only one pie that Lego has, and the licensed themes are taking more of the pie than they should be, and the non-licensed themes are kind of left with the scraps, and to use that analogy.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just that the ratio of sets, the ratio of themes is one thing. as you said, were relatively even as it currently stands.
Mhm.
But the ratio of sets is not even close. I would say that the licensed themes probably have twice as many sets. And they're just getting more and more of a grip on Lego. And the one outlet that a lot of people had to avoid kind of the onslaught of licenses was the collectible minifigures. Because for a while they thought that Lego was like in this licensed phase, but here have this set of highly detailed minifigures that are not licensed, and you can do whatever you want with them. Just kind of a like an apology note, and people were really happy with that until Lego took that away from them too. And last year, I believe we were working with two non-licensed themes, or one series of collectible minifigures when it used to be three a year. Now we're down to one. We've got multiple different. There was a Simpsons series. They've got all these other things they're putting in their collectible minifigure series. There's a Unikitty series, but all that they had last year was the Series 18, and even that was messed up because it had figures were just in costumes. They didn't have anybody that was just a spaceman or just a knight, just a pirate. They had to put a gimmick into that too, and I think it's just that there's so much less variety in these non-licensed themes, and it's a direct cause of there being too many licensed themes.
Interesting. Okay, so you would take the stance that the more licensed themes and more licensed sets will decrease the quality and quantity of original properties. Let me see here. Apologies if to anyone listening if there are breaks in the conversation. That's not because we're just not talking. It's just because of the technological difficulties of Discord. Discord is just being a little persnickety today. So, very briefly, I just want to kind of contextualize one of the points you mentioned earlier. Again, this is not a calling you out on anything. I'm actually genuinely curious as to how many sets per theme there are. So I'm very briefly looking at Brickset to see the quantity, the proportion of licensed and non-licensed sets. So, basing this off of Brickset, I'm going to exclude the two crossovers, Lego Movie 2 and the Polybags, because those are really difficult to get a proper, they don't really fit functionally into this conversation. So, first, let's look over the non-licensed themes. So this would be Technic, Friends, Creator, Ninjago, and City. And then I'll go ahead and bring up a calculator. Okay, so Technic has 9. They have 9 new sets in 2019. Friends has 18. And again, this is all according to Brickset. Creator has 13. Ninjago, they have 20, according to Brickset. Go ahead and plug that in. City is going to have 26. And that gives us roughly 86 original theme sets. Now, very briefly, before we continue, I do want to touch on something you mentioned earlier regarding themes and what quantifies a theme. But we'll get into that momentarily. So, alright, original, we've got about 86, roughly. And then, for non-original themes, licenses, Star Wars is getting around 13. Disney is getting around 6. Marvel is getting around 12. Speed Champions is getting around 5. And Minecraft is also getting around 6. So that gives us about 42, which is half, roughly. So, in kind of just, again, just going over everything and just looking at it all, it would seem as though licensed properties aren't getting as many sets, and I think a lot of that might have to do with Star Wars not doing very well, because all Star Wars toys are not doing very well. But even still, you believe that these 42 sets are taken away. And again, this is also, I'm sure Brick Set is including stuff like polybags, so I'm sure both of these are probably a bit lower than 86 and 42. So this isn't a hard number, it's a very soft number. But you realistically, where would you prefer to see these numbers annually?
Okay. Well, first of all, I did not know that that ratio would look like that. I think that's not usually the norm, I don't think. Last year, I did those calculations myself just out of curiosity, and I found that the licensed themes had about 30% more sets. It was a rough estimate again, and part of that was due to the brickheads. There were a lot of those, and I actually went in and counted the non-licensed and licensed ones, and I just out. But I think that's probably closer to an ideal ratio. Again, is very, very low in January. I'm not entirely sure. It might be due to the toys not selling as well, period, because of the recent, kind of busts in the cinema, like the Solo movie. But again, I think that's going to even out more soon. I don't think it will remain that much in the non-licensed theme's favor. As you know, the Infinity War sets are coming out. The Star Wars 9 is coming out this year. That's going to get a ton of stuff. And that's going to be its own wave. Star Wars is going to have its own summer wave and a third wave for that movie that's probably going to double its sets. And you're going to get more sets. And those tend to come out in the summer. So while most years probably start with an advantage to some point for these non-licensed themes, it's going to even out. And the problem is, as they introduce new movie-based sets or even new licenses, I'm sure there will be a couple in the summer, they, as far as I know, do not have any new plans to put out something that is non-licensed this year. And it's the lack of things that's new and the lack of variety that kind of alienates people. And even if you had a small theme with just a few sets that was non-licensed but actually was its own thing, we're not talking about generic brick boxes. I will not count that. Actual thought-out theme that just had one wave, it would draw in new people. Because if you want a non-licensed theme and you're not into Future Ninjas, regular City stuff, that would be City and Friends, or kind of like, stuff that doesn't really have to do with regular Lego bricks, more like the Technic type stuff. If you're not into one of those three categories, you really don't have anything at all. And there's nothing that's going to first for that over on the licenses, because they're pretty much the same categories, just licensed. So
yeah, and I see where you're coming from, and that's why I wanted to make perfectly clear this wasn't a gotcha kind of a deal. This was a genuine look at the numbers, because you are very, very right. This is discounting the movie themes. This is discounting sets that we're going to get later on, because I don't think Brick Set has those in their catalog right yet. So that's why I'm very glad you mentioned that, because this is not, again, these are very soft numbers, and you are very, very right. These could change dramatically. And of course, because Brick Set isn't listing brickheads, and even then I'd be hesitant to list brickheads because they're a little bit of a mix. That would take a lot more time to actually delve into. That could also alter it, because I think it's really crazy, the brickheads theme, because, oh gosh, brickheads had a lot of sets. I don't think that people truly realize how many brickheads came out. In 2018, it was 44 brickheads. 2019, we're only looking at around 6 thus far. So that's just an amazing number to me. I didn't realize how many actually released. So, but no, that's why I didn't want this to be kind of a, haha, see, look, licensed themes, they don't have as many as you thought. It's just a look at the numbers, and that's why this is a very interesting conversation, because there are a lot of factors to consider. So, let's conversate about, or converse about, what constitutes a theme. So to me, a theme would be basically just any product line LEGO is releasing that is condensed to a focus. So a theme would be city, because it's focused on city. The theme of it is city. Ninjago, the theme is Ninjago, and the theme is the world it has created. So what do you constitute and value in a theme?
I think it's a series of sets, as you said, I agree, that are kind of around a focal point or themed after a certain topic or an era. We're talking about, like, for an era, for example, the Wild West sets that they put out in the '90s. That was a theme, and the theme was just general Wild West. It didn't have a specific storyline, but it had a lot of the mill things you would find in that setting.
Mm-hmm.
Something that when you put it together on a table or in your collection, it looks cohesive.
Mm-hmm.
And after that, I mean, all bets are off. What you actually have in that theme, so long as it looks cohesive. But I think that it's just a kind of a bare bones outline of what that is.
Okay. Okay, that's fair. So you don't care too terribly much about whether or not any given theme has a story or a plot line, aka Nexo Knights or Ninjago.
No, I don't think a plot line has anything to do with what makes it a theme. I do think that when you put in a plot line, you're kind of towards like Big Bang theme territory, which is what Nexo Knights and Ninjago were. They had a very fleshed out storyline, and most of the characters had names.
Mm-hmm.
They had a conflict. There was a resolution. There was a television series. The whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
But
BB, you still there? Oh, hello. We're seeing some more technical difficulties in German. Blink twice if you're still there, BB.
still here.
Okay, alright, cool. Sorry. Discord, they had an outage earlier. So, it's a little persnickety. So, please continue, though, as you were saying.
Okay, so another example of a theme would be kind of like you don't need a storyline, but it would be preferable if you had something you could make a story out of, as long as you're given a sets that interact with one another, and you don't even need characters, as long as you just need figures, really.
Okay.
That don't even need all that, too much detail or anything in order to make an actual theme. Or maybe your theme doesn't even have figures, but as long as it's cohesive, it could be a theme.
Okay.
They used to do back in the day, it was like Model Team, I believe it was called. It was a lot of large vehicles. You had airplanes, cars, stuff like that. They didn't have figures, but when you put them together, it was cohesive.
Okay. Okay, so that's why you don't consider things like, you wouldn't call maybe not creator. Classic, I figure, would be a better example. So the box is just full of bricks and, all the recommended models, the inspiration models and stuff like that, and so on and so forth. You would not consider that a theme so much as a line.
That's more of a line, I would say, because it's just a box of bricks. So there's not really too much you can make anything out of that you want.
Mm-hmm.
And have anything other than just the bricks.
Okay. Okay. Fair enough. So you're that's reasonably consistent. So what you're saying is, a theme would be something with a focus. It's something that looks cohesive together, but a line would be something just like bricks. There would be or the extra polybags and stuff like that. So that's all right. So in that instance, when it comes to all of these themes, when we go to the end of the year, let's say the lines end up being equal. Like, we have a very statistically even look at licensed and non-licensed properties. And Lego is still going. They still exist. Because Lego has a very fascinating history. I'm sure you're familiar with the history Lego has in the early 2000s, late 1990s when it comes to licensed properties and whatnot. Or licensed and original properties, I should specify.
I do.
Okay, excellent. For anyone that is unaware, Lego, late 1990s, financial ruin on the horizon. You know, we're not looking at a very good thing right now. Lego gets the Star Wars license. It's keeping them afloat. Everything's looking all hunky-dory until they realize, hey, we have to pay a large fee for this, which is what BB was talking about earlier. It's a licensing fee because Star Wars is licensing the property to Lego, Lucasfilm or Disney or whoever. And Lego realizes, well, hey, this is super popular. It's really, really popular. A lot of people really love this, but we're not really making a whole lot out of this deal. So what Lego ended up doing is they created their original themes. They tested the waters with Throwbots. They tested the waters with Roboriders. And then finally they had a smash success with Bionicle. That's why you'll often find a lot of people making comparisons between Bionicle, the original successful story, original IP that Lego had, to other current original IPs, such as Nexo-Knights, Chima, and Ninjago. So, in your opinion, you would personally find it best for Lego if they had more original licenses, original IPs. You would rather that they have their own originality. Do you think that those would sell well? Do you believe that there is the demand for them?
Well, I think that's an interesting question because they've kind of had a varied degree of success with how these Big Bang themes have sold. As you know, the original Bionicle, as you said, was very popular. But the second time, when they tried to bring it back a few years ago, it sold badly. I have read reports that it sold so badly they scrapped a third year.
Mm-hmm. They did.
I'm pretty sure that's true.
Yeah, no,
And
that's
they didn't even...
No, but please continue, unless you've been disconnected by Discord.
Okay. They, some people argue that might be uninspired. You know, like the first time they went at it with, a little bit more push, and the second time it was just kind of this kind of like half-baked attempt to appeal to fans of the first time around. And that might be true to an extent. Varied degree of success with some of their other themes. Ninjago was wildly successful. I would argue that Chima really was not selling too well, at least from what I was reading and what I was seeing. There were 2015 Chima sets on the shelves at my local Toys R Us, RIP, as recently as early last year. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, those were not moving at all. And Nexo-Knights started out well in its first year. It was moving along nicely until they kind of kneecapped themselves in the second year with the very kind of bland-looking stone monster sets that weren't as appealing. They had a lot of grays, they had a lot of darker tones, and people weren't really into that. So then they kind of had to cut that a little bit short too, and we're sure there would have been another wave last summer. But again, I don't think it sold well enough to warrant continuing. And I think that for Lego to make non-licensed themes is that they do not have a set storyline, because when you have a storyline, you have to keep the storyline going. And as you continue and you get farther and farther into the story, it becomes less and less coherent, and you descend into lore. And you have a lot of lore. And that's kind of the problem they had with Bionicle, where there was so much lore that younger kids and newer fans were kind of like, what am I reading? Or do you want me to go through all of this stuff just to figure out what the story is, what was important? How am I supposed to even be able to figure that out? And I think that Ninjago, despite its success, it's very, very popular. It's running into the same problem. It's getting, younger kids now are like, who are these people? Who are all these characters? Why are there like new characters appearing out of the blue? Why did all the ninja just regress back?
Mm-hmm.
Something completely different, which is what they have for these new legacy sets. Really young kids that do not understand that that's a callback to 2011 are not going to get that, and they're going to wonder why all the villains in the entire storyline just shifted like that. And that's Lego's attempt to kind of give the whole thing a soft reboot, which they already did last year. So now they've tried that twice, and they've got three different storylines going on at the same time, as well as the movie sets, which again are only slightly related. So you've got
Mm-hmm.
so many different levels of lore going on with Ninjago right now. In some levels, Garmadon is dead. In the other ones, he's a good guy and he's Lloyd's father. In the other ones, he's still a bad guy. And kids are just not going to understand that. And that culminates in them the show or buy the sets. And that's generally where themes run out of steam. But if you had something like a space or a castle, or even a city, which has been popular forever, since the first year it came out, Cities thing is just all it does is just make stuff that's in everyday life.
Mm-hmm.
And people are going to want that forever. So that's always going to be successful, and there's no need for a story. And Castle and Space have their own kind of popular, within pop culture. At some points, they're not, but a core audience of people that want one of those categories. And as long as you just put out a few sets a year for each one of those, you can change the colors, you can change the builds, but people will still want them. And the fact that those don't have a story is probably their best selling point.
Mm-hmm. Okay. There's a lot to touch on when it comes to that. So I'll consolidate. I'll go as quickly as I can because there are a lot of very interesting things to make note of. First of all, trust me, if you want to know anything about Bionicle, ask me anything because
Yeah.
what you said is essentially true. First of all, can we agree on the premise that a what we would consider a successful theme as consumers would be a theme that has run and lasted 3 years. Roughly 3 years. They have had sets seen released in 3 different consecutive years. Because LEGO plans for a 3-year run. Do you think can you agree to that premise?
I think that's right.
Okay, excellent. So in that case, yes, Bionicle Generation 2 was cut dramatically short. It was cut a full year short. It was planned for 3, as most LEGO story themes are, but then it ended early because, also as you mentioned, they did not sell very well. Now, this is, of course, a hypothesis based on a consumer perspective. We don't know the ins and outs, and we don't know the specifics, but Bionicle Generation 2 did not do very well. And there are a variety of circumstances and in conversation points as to why that might be. I've gone into it. I won't go into it here because it's not the primary point. Bionicle Generation 1 obviously did brilliantly, and you are also right. I'm very happy to talk to someone who at least knows what they're talking about when it comes to Bionicle, because you're also right. The theme suffered greatly from having a consistent, long-running story and lore, because at the end it tired consumers out. They weren't able to keep up. The children weren't able to keep up because there was such a backlog of stuff, and as such, they were not telling their interest to the actual consumer of the product, which would be the adults or grandparents or so on and so forth. They weren't really sure what to be getting, and it wasn't being as demanded, and so on and so forth. So you're also right there. When it comes to Ninjago, I kind of sort of agree. They're definitely going to be getting to a point. I don't know how Ninjago is doing. The best I can offer is it was in the top 4 best-selling themes of LEGO for 2018 when they released that statistic. So it's at least doing well enough. I think the final point, actually, rather. Castle, Space, and I'll say Aqua, because Atlantis isn't always the focus. So underwater, Pirates, Castle, and Space. They're rotating themes. These are themes that we often see. They will come back for a short amount of time, and then they will rotate. They will go out of circulation for a little bit, wait a few years, come back. Would you rather see them as a constant, or do you think it's better for those types of themes to be rotating, like Nexonites, and that was the latest Castle iteration, and now it's going to stop for a little bit, and then it's going to come back later as something different, or would you rather see them as constants?
I think it's better to see them as constant. Obviously, they can take a year or two break, not too much longer than that, between each iteration of their theme. But if you trade off and you put all of them in the same continuum, like let's say the next Big Bang theme is a Big Bang Pirates theme or space. At that point, you keep pushing back. The next time a fan of one of those, let's just go with three, one of those three themes gets their next theme. And when it comes back, it might not even be something they like.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I waited half a decade for this, or I waited this long for this kind of thing that doesn't appeal to me at all. And at that point, you lose a fan. So they should all stay in their own lanes and kind of consolidating them into one thing where, admittedly they will get a very large marketing push, but the drawback of that is basically have to hit a home run with that theme, and if you screw it up, you lose a lot of fans of that theme. So I think doing previously was pretty good. I understood space took a break in the early 2000s because Star Wars was having its big moment with the original trilogy, or the prequel trilogy, and Pirates has never really been too much of a constant. It was only ever that way for about 7 years, and then come back once a decade, and I suspect it'll do that in about 2 years. But space and castles should always be constants and should only vary within their own spheres. Like, at one point, space was Space Police, Alien Conquest, which is a different thing. It didn't last for that long. But they're given more room to experiment because there's room for error.
Mm-hmm.
Because if it doesn't do well, you could just roll out the next idea you have in line and then just see what you do then. So where we're at now is that the first one of those three themes to get the go-around in the Big Bang treatment. And, well, I'd argue Knights Kingdom 2 was a Big Bang too. But in this modern thing with Ninjago, Chima, and Nexo, this cycle will continue, but those three are all very similar in terms of layout. Nexo Knights was a kind of combination of castle and space, but I will tell you this for a fact. The castle fans, like the ones on brick, stuff like that, they do not consider castle or Nexo Knights to be a castle theme. They're thinking we have not had a castle theme for 6 years, and you will see that reflected over on some place like Eurobricks. The historic theme section is absolutely dead. There are only mocks there, right? There are no discussion topics. Nobody cares, and I don't blame them because there's nothing to talk about. They don't even have the Lord of the Rings anymore. So, Lego took 3 years off for Castle. And when they came back, they gave us this what they believed to be a very poor theme in Nexo Knights that was kind of this, unholy combination of castle and space. And they didn't want that, so they didn't buy it.
Mm-hmm.
And those people, Lego is at risk of losing very long-time customers and those people.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I see the perspective. I definitely, as someone who... I don't delve very heavily into a lot of the castle space or other themes. I don't really find myself in that section of Lego's repertoire, or the Lego Group's repertoire, or catalog, I suppose. So I'm not as well versed, but just as an outsider kind of looking in, I definitely would consider Nexo Knights to be a castle theme, since castle is fairly straightforward. It's just knights. At the very bare minimum, it's knights versus something else. We've seen a variety of different opponents. We've seen other knights with Knights Kingdom. We've seen skeletons with... Well, I think it was just called Castle. I don't exactly recall, but it was just that. Maybe a dragon here or there, potentially, but generally, knights and a castle of some variety. So I see definitely Nexo Knights as falling into that category, even though it does have a retro technological modernization. Retro and modernization don't work, but you get my point. But I can see how people would not consider that because it is not a classic historical castle theme. And would you where do you stand on that? Do you find it to be a castle theme? And as at that point, do you also see Ninjago as a ninja theme?
Right, that is an interesting question that I think I've changed my opinion on over the years. I started out for Nexo being a castle theme. I saw it kind of the same way you did. There were knights, they had the four treks, and admittedly, it was a castle that was on tank treads, but it was still a castle, right? So
Yeah.
there was a sword plane. There was a crossbow plane. There were a bunch of things that were the knights did their part to kind of harken back to medieval stuff. Even the crests. Clay, the main protagonist, has a Black Falcon logo on his chest, and I believe that was enough, kind of the main canon of castle stuff, and the villains were also very usable in castle settings. And I argued to people, I was like, you guys have wanted lava monsters forever, and kind of more demon-looking figures that you could use in your builds, and LEGO just gave you a whole bunch of them that are like super cool, and I don't see the need to complain about that. But then, over the years, Nexo Knights got less and less grounded, or what it originally was. It really deviated, and by the third year, there was nothing castle in it at all. They were flying around in like jets. There was just a regular tank with no castle stuff attached to it. There were mechs happening that were not even related to castle or anything. There was a whole bunch of just very random stuff that made it look like a space theme. And even the villains were straight up, like there was nothing medieval in them at all, or even fantasy. And back in the day when Nexo Knights came out, there was a poll on Eurobricks that asked if Nexo Knights was a castle theme or not. And I believe there were 100 votes for it being a castle theme and like 99 against it being a castle theme. So we've always been very, very split on that. And I think if you were to put that poll back out there, 3/4 of people would say it is not a castle theme, based on those reasons.
Interesting. Honestly, I actually think I'll do that, because I'll put a poll out on Twitter. Do you consider Nexo Knights to be a castle theme? And see where that goes. I think that would be, the results of that would genuinely be fascinating. So, in that same vein, how do you feel about Ninjago? Traditionally, ninja themes are considered kind of a sub-theme of castle, but for now, let's go ahead and just consider ninja its own thing. Do you consider Ninjago to be a ninja theme? And if you still see ninja as a part of castle, do you see it as a castle theme?
So this is another continuum question. Ninja, the original theme from the 90s, I would consider to be it's a historical theme castle setting. If you were to put your ninja sets on one half of your table, castle sets on the other half, really cohesive. It would be like kind of different areas of the world, if you will. But it would be kind of in the same style. Like the ninja in that theme were not driving around in mechs. They didn't have tanks. They were just your traditional, Japanese style, and like stuff like that. And the ninja theme is closer to castle, much closer than Ninjago. Much closer to Nexo Knights than it is ninja.
Mm-hmm.
If you put your Nexo Knights and your Ninjago sets on the same table, really cohesive, because they're both similar themes in terms of set design. Ninjago probably has an advantage there, but set design, they're pretty similar. A lot of the same designers worked on those sets. Storyline, just how many sets there were released over that period. Those are very similar, and I don't think Ninjago is even anywhere close to Ninja in terms of how they would go together. If anything, Ninja is what the world of Ninjago looked like 1,000 years before the story took place.
Mm-hmm.
I would consider Ninja is a satellite theme of castle, more distant so than Vikings, which is another theme that's not explicitly a castle theme, but it's something I would say is, and a lot of people consider to be a castle theme. So those two themes are much closer to castle than Nexo Knights and Ninjago.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Fair enough. I can see the dissection there. So, as we kind of come toward the end here, but obviously, yeah, there's still a lot to discuss, so we'll get into it. When it comes back, kind of pivoting back to licensed themes and how well they perform, because obviously enough, a license does well and sticks around. We've seen that in a variety of different ways with Marvel, DC, Star Wars, Minecraft, so on. You said, I believe you've stated in your video, and you mentioned to me before we started, you don't see licensed themes as all bad. Where do you see licensed themes doing good?
What?
Where do you see licensed themes doing well, doing good, being a positive for the LEGO Group?
I think they're a positive in small doses. Lego has a couple they've clung to for a long time. Star Wars, positive. Not as much of a positive as people think because of the fees they had to pay. A positive in terms of their growth for a long time, but now I think it's starting to hurt them a bit because they're putting out so much and they haven't really changed the amount or the volume of sets they're putting out, but it's not selling as well, so it's becoming more of an albatross, if anything. And Superheroes is still doing its thing. Superheroes kind of has a referendum after Infinity War because it's a referendum on Marvel. And if Marvel continues to put out films that people want to see, the final Avengers movie, after the storyline for all those characters has concluded, and LEGO has never really forayed too much into superheroes before that giant glut of sets that came out with the original Avengers movie in 2012. That was when they went kind of haywire on the Marvel and DC stuff. But we'll see what happens after Infinity War, and if it gets to the point where after the new trilogy that Star Wars and Marvel are both struggling, then I think that LEGO should consider ending one of them in order to keep the other one back. But they should consider ending one of them because if you have too many themes like that weighing on you, they're not really any better off than they were in the early 2000s where they had a lot of themes that weren't doing too well. And these just have licenses attached to them. Better off kind of looking at what you have and trying to get something from within with one of your original themes, plugging something in to see if you can kind of recoup the power that one of those two themes had, except this time you're not paying the fee.
Interesting. So which one would you rather see get the axe?
I would axe Star Wars.
Okay. Yeah, I can kind of see where one might be coming from by axing Star Wars. It is generally recycling of concepts and designs, and at least with comics, you have a large creative swath of concepts and designs to kind of pull from. There's a lot more variety there. And so I can see that. So, in your opinion, 5 years down the line, let's say nothing changes. Let's say LEGO has the half and half split between licensed and non-licensed themes. Where do you see the LEGO Group in 5 years if this is a constant?
Well, to put it simply, I think they'd be in financial trouble. They have lost money the last 2 years, and if they don't change what they're doing, and they keep it exactly the same way it is, they continue to lose money. And 5 years from now, you know, if they fired, I believe the figure was a little bit over 1,000 employees in 2017, and they can't afford to keep doing that every year. And if they keep doing that for the next half decade, they certainly will not be the force that I think they really peaked a few years ago, but that they still currently are to an extent. A force in the market. If they keep losing money, they're going to have to do a bit of soul searching. And if this model does not work anymore, I think that you're going to see that come to a very quick close.
Okay. All right. Okay. And where do you see them, far more short term, where do you see them at the end of the year? Where do you see LEGO's portfolio being at?
I don't know how they're going to do this year, to be honest with you. They need to replace the themes they discontinued that were non-licensed. And other than that, this is kind of an interesting year for them. BB202 does. There's a lot up in the air. That's all. That's what I say on that.
Okay, that's reasonable. Very briefly, I don't want to get too into the weeds with this because I've had this conversation. Trust me, I mean, I've had this convo many, many a time. But how do you feel about the dichotomy between system themes and construction themes? You know, Hero Factory, Bionicle, Throwbots, so on and so forth. Do you feel that those play a factor? Do you think those are a good for LEGO? Where do you stand on construction?
Well, I don't know how well they sell, so I don't know how long you'd be able to put one out there. But I think the Bionicle is a positive to a point. I don't know where it's going to be now. If you'll excuse me real quick, I just got to grab something. I'll be back in a few seconds.
Oh yeah, no, that's perfectly fine. Go for it. While he isn't here, I'll let everyone know where I stand on construction and Bionicle. I definitely think LEGO should see another construction theme, since I still believe that there is a market for that. However, I don't necessarily think it should be Bionicle. Bionicle had its first run, and that was massively, wildly successful, altered how the LEGO group operates and functions to this very day. The second run was a egregious mishandling, especially from a marketing perspective, which I am of the opinion brutally killed it. However, I would like to see construction come back in some way, shape, or form. So, we are getting up to the question portion, so if anyone has any questions that they'd like to ask either of us, feel free in the YouTube live chat. Go ahead and start asking whatever question that you have, and we will go ahead and get to answering them very shortly before we go ahead and wrap up. So, at the moment, we are just waiting for him to return. I do apologize for any of the technical difficulties anyone has had to endure this session. Again, Discord had some severe connectivity issues earlier in the day that has probably still reflected in the pacing of this episode. Because this actually kind of reminds me of the first episode I did with Elira. And a lot of people said, oh, it sounds a little awkward. The conversation sounds a bit stilted. And it wasn't because we were awkward about it. It wasn't an awkward situation. You know, I have known Elira for, at that point, at least a year or two. You know, we've conversed on several occasions. You know, there was no awkwardness. It was just a matter of the lag and the connection that made it so that our responses were delayed. So, it's a similar situation here. Oh, perfect. All right. So, I kind of agree with you. I still personally, as I was just talking about, I still think there's a market for construction. I don't think it should be Bionicle. I think they should leave Bionicle alone, especially after the egregious mishandling of the prior theme, specifically from a marketing perspective. But that's a whole nother issue. So, before we get into questions, taking questions from those that are listening, BB, I'm going to let you take the floor. Go ahead and kind of just basically state your piece, state where you're coming from with LEGO, and make your standpoint known. So the floor is yours.
So I think that, as I said, there are too many licensed themes. I think there hasn't been enough of an improvement in recent years by LEGO to address this problem. And I think that the problem is not so much so licensed themes, that there aren't enough non-licensed themes. And I never would have made the video I made, the two of them really, the why LEGO should bring back Castle and how licensed themes ruin LEGO. I wouldn't have made those had LEGO not given me, really, they kind of cut off everything that I liked about them, and they've kind of changed in a way that I don't really agree with. And they're going in a direction that doesn't even appear to be financially profitable. So to reconsider what their current game plan is, and to put in something that has a non-licensed, that is a non-licensed theme that people are going to enjoy, and then I think that you're going to hear less dissent who kind of don't like the direction they're going in, and I think that would just be probably the best way forward for them. Or next year, Just put something in that we're gonna like, and I'll be happy.
Okay. Fair enough. In that case, BB, do you want to take some questions?
Yeah, sure. I'm not reading the chat right now, but
Perfect. No, that's fine. I'm gonna read them out to you. So you're all good. All right. So the first question is from Henry Bricklader, who asks, BB, has there been any licensed theme that you really liked in the last few years?
um, I wouldn't say I really liked happening in the last few years. There have been licenses that I have bought, more of kind of impulse buys. But the last big license set I bought was Kylo Ren Shuttle and Poe's X-Wing from 2015. Major expenditures for me on those, and the the experiences were not great. Poe's X-Wing had a few issues with them, or with it, with the engines. Cockpit windscreen was cockeyed so that you couldn't even put it down all the way. And Kylo Ren's shuttle had the aforementioned issues that I said, where it wasn't even faithful to the film, and it didn't have. And I think the price combined with lack of functionality of both of those really turned me off from buying any licensed stuff since then. So I did get a couple of Batman movie sets. I got a couple of very small Marvel sets just to get certain characters, but there hasn't been really a licensed theme I've liked.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. Again, I really do recommend. I don't know if you play the game, but even if you don't, I highly recommend a Lego Minecraft set. I think you'll be pleasantly surprised. However, that's just me. I'm obviously quite biased toward Minecraft, so I make that recommendation. Take it as you will. I think you'd be interested. But all right. Tesla Effect asks, BB, what original IP would you like to see come back with newer pieces and all?
That's a great question. I want first and foremost, I want Castle to come back. I think Pirates has had a more recent iteration than the last true Castle theme, so Pirates can probably sit on the sidelines for a year or two more. Plus, it's not really as important of a theme to Lego, and it never really has been. So Space is currently getting their moment in the sun with the Benny Space Squad, which is just a fantastic set. I'm going to be getting that here pretty soon. But it's selling so well, it's on back order, which is actually funny to me. You know, the people that say that licensed themes sell so much better than non-licensed themes, you have to wonder, like, of people that are buying that Benny set, it's probably going to be the best-selling set of 2019. Well, for Lego, to the point where they consider bringing Space back. But I would like Castle back because there's so much they could do with it, with the new parts they've introduced.
Mm-hmm.
It would largely be because of the collectible minifigures. They've introduced new swords, new hair pieces, new helmets, new armor, all that. And truly be striking if Lego were to put out a Castle theme this summer, and you will see just how much minifigure design and parts have changed since the last iteration in 2013. It's truly astounding how much they've changed their parts since then, and I think you'd have some really excellent builds that would draw a lot of people in.
Interesting. Personally, I'm a huge fan of any new hair pieces we get. The more hair pieces, the better. Personally, because I like making sig figs of people. So, okay. All right. Let me see here. In that case, next question is from Fudge. I keep on... Sometimes I get this name right, sometimes I don't. Rakronduel asks, any speculation on what LEGO may be working on? I've been watching their job site, and they are hiring a lot of software design / developers.
For designers, huh? Yeah, I think if they're working on software design, it's probably new video game or a new kind of thing like Dimensions, where they had a toy aspect and a video game aspect. Do more with software design. Another possibility is something like Dimensions is probably most likely for that. There could be a new video game, whether or not that's for Star Wars or Marvel or something like that, but just going off that little bit of information, I'm not really sure that pertains to too much relating to non-licensed themes, but I will be interested to see what that leads to.
Okay. Tree of Ore Productions asks, do you think LEGO will last forever as a company?
My answer to that is definitely no, because forever is a very long time. And an example of that would be Sears in the 1870s, 1880s, and during its peak, which was very far into the company history, people are like, be here forever. They couldn't imagine a world without Sears. It was a giant. It was the biggest thing in its market. And then little by little, it kind of died off. And here we are, 130 years in, and it's finally about to kick the bucket. And Lego has been around for 80 years. It just peaked a few years ago, I would say. I don't think I would even expect it to last into the next century, because that's probably not just, not a good guess, I don't think, because you don't know what could happen in a period of time. I mean, theoretically anything could happen, and there are so many different factors that could lead to their demise. I won't even get into it. But I think that it's definitely insured for the next few decades.
Okay. Yeah, I can kind of agree, at the very least. I don't know if they'll last too many decades more. I don't honestly know, but I can definitely see them sticking around. So, but I think that's a good... I like that analogy, the Sears analogy. That's a good one. All right, Henry asks, do you think that Lord of the Rings was a good substitution for a proper castle theme?
I have a lot to say about Lord of the Rings. Actually, in my most viewed video ever on my channel, it got so many dislikes because I ranted for a very long time about how much I hated Lord of the Rings. Because that was the first year I had gotten into Castle in 2010, pretty much. And you had 2010 and 2011, and then 2012 was the first year where LEGO wasn't really doing a castle theme. They had the Kingdom's Joust, but other than that, there wasn't a regular wave of sets. And obviously, Lord of the Rings was the reason they didn't do that. And at that point, I was so into Castle, I was distraught when they announced that Kingdoms was going to be discontinued because I loved it so much. So I really hated Lord of the Rings when that came out. Now that it's been discontinued, and the fact that it only stopped Castle from coming out for 1 year, it wasn't that bad. I'm not a fan of Lord of the Rings. I never have been. But I will admit that the set designs were quite good. I liked the Tower of Orthanc, I believe it was called. And I like the fact that they gave something to the fans that the fans thought they would never get. Somebody would be like, are we getting Lord of the Rings sets ever? And people would be like, no, it's impossible. And they actually did it. So I do admire the fact that they were willing to step out of their comfort zone a bit. I don't know if it paid off for them as a financial investment, but yeah, Lord of the Rings was the first real theme that made me kind of resent licensed themes.
Okay. Interesting. That's a very interesting perspective. I have no vested interest in Lord of the Rings, basically at all, so I've got no horse in that race. Sakota asks, BB, do you think kids today maybe aren't as interested in non-licensed stuff as a couple of years ago?
Well, I doubt that, because first of all, talk from designers and people that are well acquainted with kind of their upper network that say the kids are still just as interested in timeless topics that they always have been. But it's just they don't have too much of a room on their slate of upcoming themes for them anymore, and they don't really know how they're going to fit them in with their current themes. So stuff that's holding back space, which has always been popular and probably always will be, space has been held back by Star Wars forever. And space ran uninterrupted for its first 20 years. Then Star Wars comes out, and you will note that as soon as Star Wars comes out, space takes a 6-year break. And space is currently on a 6-year hiatus again, because there's a new Star Wars trilogy. So it's not really so much as to do that kids don't like it as much anymore, because these ideas are very timeless, and kids for hundreds of years have liked these, compared to kids who have maybe 20 or 30 years of like Marvel Comics or Star Wars. It's much shorter. So I think, if anything, Star Wars and Marvel will die out before the people's love of space, castle, and other just generic things will.
Mm-hmm. All right. I did not know that about the space theme taking so many extensive breaks. Like, I knew it was on a break. I did not know that's how long it has been. So it's very interesting information. All right. Let me see here. There is another question. I know there is. I saw it. It exists. Ah, okay. This is a good one. Tesla Effect asks, BB, have you tried a mangosteen?
Manga?
A mangosteen.
A mango what?
Mangosteen.
Not entirely sure what that is, to be honest with you.
Yeah, no, that's fair. That's fair. It is a fruit. It is a fruit that is not related to a mango whatsoever. So, but no, that's perfectly reasonable. So, all right. In that case, I believe that's about everything. No, yeah, okay. We're gonna go ahead and make this the last question. Albert Kim asks, if LEGO were to reboot LEGO Knights Kingdom in place of a castle theme, do you think it may be popular / successful?
Okay, well, Knights Kingdom 2, I believe, was pretty successful. It did get a 3-year run, but that was 15 years ago, which is actually pretty crazy to think about how that, time flies.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of people kind of mockingly called Nexo Knights Knights Kingdom 3. In that, it was a radical departure they had been doing in regards to the castle theme. And when Knights Kingdom 2 did that, if you look to the Knights Kingdom 2 sets compared to the Nexo Knights sets and how they look when put on a table next to castle, I own all three. They're actually very, very similar to your traditional castle sets. The only difference are like the multicolored knights, who were called the Jelly Beans or the Rainbow Knights, stuff like that, the Power Rangers.
Mm-hmm.
But there is another poll. Yeah, I know a lot about this. There's another poll on Eurobricks from when that theme was out in 2005. And it asks, do you believe Knight's Kingdom is a castle theme? And 2/3 of respondents said no. Overwhelming majority of people said Knight's Kingdom 2 is not a castle theme. And now when you look at today, it's universally considered a castle theme. I find that interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And if LEGO were to make another Knight's Kingdom, would people call it a castle theme? Especially after they just saw an example of what is truly pushing the boundaries with Nexo Knights of what is a castle theme. I think they would. So I don't know if kids want the story again. I think they'd be safer making a generic theme.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Do you think that 5 years down the line, even, people will consider Nexo Knights a castle theme?
Don't, and I think that your poll is going to show that.
Okay, fair enough. I'm gonna start that poll. Mark my words. All right.
Twitter.
Say what now? I believe you cut out there, BB. What was that?
Is the poll going to be on your Twitter?
Yes, it will. And I'm hoping to get a lot of respondents, a lot of feedback pertaining to that poll. The account recently hit 1,000 followers, so I appreciate everyone who follows the Twitter account. It's greatly appreciated. And make sure to interact with this poll. I'm very interested to see the results. So, all right. I think that basically about covers... I won't even say everything. I think we didn't even really scratch the surface. The only reason I'm suggesting we probably put this to rest right now is let Discord sort itself out. BB, I'd like to offer you an open invitation to come back later this year, shortly before the year ends, so that we can kind of take an opportunity to look back, reflect on this conversation, see where LEGO is at the end of the year, see what the lineup looks like, and get a little bit deeper into the castle conversation, see where the poll lands, see where LEGO is with its themes. And additionally, I'd love to know your perspective on minifigures and classic looks and the modern look of minifigures. So I think that would be a lot more we can converse. So again, I offer you an open invitation to come back on the show and discuss things right before the year ends. How does that sound?
That's great. I'd love to.
Fantastic. Now, I'm also going to take this opportunity to let you mention that you are on YouTube. As an official disclaimer from me, I cannot fully endorse all the content on his channel, not because it isn't family friendly. He does a really good job of keeping it family friendly. However, there are some materials that are, to basically sum it up, they're minifigures from factory before release, which is a very gray area when it comes to leaks. So, that being the case, you can find him on YouTube, BB202. I will link 2 of his videos in the description. I highly recommend you look at them. BB, thank you so much for taking the time today. You've structured a lot of your opinions and your standpoints very well. I think that you really do a good job of wording it and kind of putting your perspectives forward. I'm really looking forward to having you on again. So again, thank you so much for taking the time today.
Great coming on here. I had a good time.
Fantastic. All right. In that case, we'll make sure to see you all later in the year, and hopefully Discord will be better, and we'll have a far more in-depth conversation. So, all right. And thank you to everyone who has been listening, be it the live version or the recorded one that will go up hopefully before Tuesday. Again, make sure that I'll get this up later today, but make sure you head on over to Twitter to check out the poll, because I'm going to put that up later today as well. But I digress. Once again, thank you all so very much for being here today. Thank you for listening, and thank you for asking all the questions. This has been another episode of The Eljay Johnsen Show. The show airs every single Saturday, every weekend at 4 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time, unless specified otherwise, over on my Twitter, at The Eljay Johnsen, where there are updates and guest announcements every single Tuesday. And if you have any questions over the week or inquiries otherwise, make sure to head on over to my email, eljayjohnsen@gmail.com. Remember, that is JOHNSEN. All right. That'll be everything. Thank you all so very much, and we will see you again another time. Have a wonderful day.